Let's talk about something that Washington doesn't want you to understand. The MAGA movement. Now, if you listen to the establishment media, they'll tell you it's about one man. They'll say it's a cult of personality, a temporary aberration in American politics that will fade away when Trump eventually leaves the stage. But here's what they're not telling you. MAGA isn't about Trump. It never was. Trump didn't create this movement. He simply gave it a voice. He put words to feelings that millions of Americans had been experiencing for decades, but couldn't articulate. The sense that something fundamental had gone wrong in America, that the country their parents built was slipping away, that the people running Washington had stopped listening to them entirely. And now, as we watch politicians like Ted Cruz, Lindsey Graham, and Mark Levin position themselves as the heirs to this movement, we need to ask ourselves, what is MAGA really about? Who gets to define it? And most importantly, what happens when the establishment tries to hijack a populist movement? Let's rewind for a moment. Before 2016, the Republican Party had a very clear identity: free trade, foreign interventionism, tax cuts for corporations, deregulation. A party that spoke the language of Main Street, but governed for Wall Street. The Bush-era Republicans promised you a compassionate conservatism while shipping your jobs to China. They told you that free trade would lift all boats, but somehow your boat kept sinking while the yachts got bigger. They sent your sons and daughters to die in endless wars in the Middle East, while defense contractors made billions. And then came 2008, the financial crisis, the bailouts. Remember that? The banks that crashed the economy got rescued with your tax dollars. The working man who lost his job and his home, he got nothing, not even an apology. The Tea Party rose up in response. Regular Americans said enough. They demanded fiscal responsibility, limited government, and accountability. And what did the Republican establishment do? They co-opted it. They neutered it. They turned it into just another fundraising vehicle. By 2015, Republican voters had learned their lesson. They'd been promised conservative principles for decades, and all they got was more debt, more war, and more jobs shipped overseas. The party leadership had shown its true colors. They cared more about maintaining their status in Washington than representing the people who elected them. Enter Donald Trump, a political outsider who said what no Republican politician dared to say. The system is rigged. Our leaders are stupid. They're getting rich while you're getting poor. And I'm going to change it. Was Trump perfect? No. Was his rhetoric sometimes inflammatory? Absolutely. But here's what mattered. He was willing to name the problems that the establishment pretended didn't exist. So, what is MAGA really about? Let's be honest about what this movement represents, because the media certainly won't be. MAGA voters believe that America should prioritize American workers. Radical idea, right? They don't think it's racist or xenophobic to suggest that our government should care more about unemployed factory workers in Ohio than maximizing profits for multinational corporations. They watched as NAFTA hollowed out the Rust Belt. They saw China join the WTO and millions of manufacturing jobs disappear. They noticed that while they were being lectured about the benefits of globalization, the people doing the lecturing never seemed to lose their jobs. MAGA supporters believe that a nation without borders isn't a nation at all. They don't hate immigrants. Many of them are immigrants or children of immigrants. But they think a country has the right to control who enters it, and that immigration policy should benefit American citizens first. They've watched their communities transformed by waves of illegal immigration. They've seen their wages suppressed by an endless supply of cheap labor. They've noticed that the politicians who support open borders invariably live in gated communities where the consequences of those policies never reach them. This might surprise you, but MAGA is fundamentally opposed to the endless wars that defined post-9/11 America. These are the people whose kids actually fight these wars. They're tired of being told that America needs to be the world's policeman while our own cities crumble. They ask simple questions. Why are we spending trillions in the Middle East when our infrastructure is falling apart? Why are we defending South Korea's border while ours is wide open? Why do we care more about Ukraine's sovereignty than our own? MAGA voters are exhausted by being told they're bigots for holding traditional values. They're tired of being lectured about pronouns and systemic racism and white privilege by wealthy elites who've never struggled a day in their lives. They notice the double standard. When they celebrate their heritage, it's called nationalism. When others do it, it's called cultural pride. When they advocate for their communities, it's called racism. When others do it, it's called justice. They're done apologizing for things they didn't do and beliefs they don't hold. Now here's where it gets interesting. Because once the MAGA movement proved it could win elections, suddenly every establishment politician wanted in. Look at Lindsey Graham. Before Trump, he was John McCain's right-hand man, a neocon who never met a war he didn't want to fight or a free trade deal he didn't want to sign. After Trump, suddenly he's Trump's biggest defender. Same guy, same policies deep down, but now wrapped in MAGA branding. Or Ted Cruz. During the 2016 primaries, Cruz positioned himself as the true conservative alternative to Trump. Now, he's trying to inherit the movement. Same Harvard-educated, Goldman Sachs-connected politician, just with a new populist veneer. Mark Levin, the conservative talk radio host, is perhaps the most interesting case. Before Trump, Levin was a constitutional conservative in the mold of the Tea Party. Now he's positioned himself as MAGA's intellectual defender. But listen carefully to what he defends. It's often the version of MAGA that's most palatable to the old conservative establishment. Here's the uncomfortable truth. The establishment is trying to do to MAGA what it did to the Tea Party. They want to capture the energy, redirect it, and ultimately neuter it. They love the MAGA voters. They need those votes. But they don't actually want to deliver on MAGA priorities, because doing so would mean challenging the power structure in Washington that benefits them. Think about it. Has immigration been fixed? No. Are the endless wars over? No. Are American workers better off? Marginally, maybe. But the fundamental problems remain. Why? Because actually solving these problems would require taking on powerful interests. It would mean telling the Chamber of Commerce that cheap labor isn't more important than American workers. It would mean telling the defense contractors that we're done with forever wars. It would mean telling big tech that censorship isn't acceptable even if it benefits the right political party. And that's a fight most politicians, even those wearing MAGA hats, aren't willing to have. So, we're at a crossroads. The question isn't whether MAGA will survive Trump's eventual departure from politics. The question is, what will it become? Scenario 1, MAGA becomes Tea Party 2.0. The establishment successfully captures the movement. They keep the rhetoric but abandon the substance. MAGA becomes just another brand for the same old Republican politics. Tax cuts for the wealthy, endless wars, and lip service to working Americans while governing for donors. This is what they're trying to do right now. You can see it happening in real time. The movement stays true to its roots. It continues to challenge the bipartisan consensus on trade, immigration, and foreign policy. It forces both parties to actually address the concerns of working and middle-class Americans instead of just paying them lip service. This is what the movement could be. But it requires voters to hold politicians accountable, especially, politicians who claim to represent MAGA. Here's how you know which scenario we're in. Look at what politicians do, not what they say. Do they actually fight to secure the border, or do they just talk about it? Do they oppose new wars and foreign entanglements, or do they find excuses to support them? Do they challenge big tech censorship and corporate power, or do they take their money and look the other way? Most importantly, do they govern for the people who elected them, or for the donors who fund their campaigns and the lobbyists who will give them cushy jobs when they leave office? Let me tell you what really terrifies the Washington establishment about MAGA. It's not Trump. Trump is a man, and all men eventually leave the stage. It's not even the policies, though they certainly don't like those. What terrifies them is that MAGA voters have stopped trusting institutions. They don't trust the media. They don't trust the experts. They don't trust the intelligence agencies. They don't trust the bureaucracy. They certainly don't trust Congress. And once that trust is gone, it's almost impossible to get back. For decades, the power structure in Washington relied on deference. They could make decisions, and the public would largely accept them because of institutional authority. The experts know best. Trust the science. We're from the government, and we're here to help. MAGA voters have seen behind the curtain. They've watched these institutions lie, repeatedly. They've seen the experts be wrong again and again. They've noticed that the people lecturing them about sacrifice never seem to sacrifice anything themselves. The Iraq War was based on lies. The financial crisis happened because the experts weren't paying attention. Or worse, were complicit. The Russia collusion narrative was a hoax. The COVID response was marked by contradiction, censorship, and policies that seemed designed to benefit certain industries while crushing small businesses. When trust in institutions collapses, democracy becomes very difficult. But here's the thing. That trust wasn't destroyed by MAGA. It was destroyed by the institutions themselves through their own incompetence and dishonesty. MAGA voters just stopped pretending otherwise. The MAGA movement represents something fundamental. A large portion of America that feels betrayed by its leadership class. These aren't extremists or radicals. They're people who played by the rules and felt like the rules changed on them. The question now is whether this movement will achieve meaningful change or be absorbed back into the same system it emerged to challenge. Washington wants you to think this is all about Trump, because if it's about Trump, it ends with Trump. But the forces that created MAGA aren't going anywhere. The job losses, the open borders, the endless wars, the cultural condescension, none of that stops just because Trump isn't president. The politicians positioning themselves as MAGA's heirs need to understand. Voters aren't stupid. They can tell the difference between someone who shares their concerns and someone who just wants their votes. Real MAGA isn't about loyalty to a person. It's about loyalty to principles. America first. Workers over corporations. Peace over endless war. And a government that actually represents the people who elected it. That's the true meaning of MAGA, and no amount of establishment spin can change it. The question is, will the politicians have the courage to deliver on it? Or will this movement suffer the same fate as every other populist uprising in American history? Captured, neutered, and ultimately betrayed by the very system it sought to change. Only time will tell, but one thing is certain. The American people are watching, and they're done being fooled.